Hi everyone, welcome, good evening, how are you? Good evening everyone, happy Wednesday. I am your host Rachel and we are back with another Keep Six, Connect the Six Instagram Live. Welcome everyone. Welcome to all of our viewers. As you know, every Wednesday we come on and we highlight community leaders and individuals within our community. Welcome everyone, one and all. Today we have an amazing special guest that's joining us from Ohio, and we are going to be talking about social work and entrepreneurship. So welcome everyone. Now I'll give you a little bit of a bio with regards to our special guest. So our special guest is Bianca Edwards-Thomas, who is a licensed social worker in Ohio with over 10 years of experience in the field of social work and 5 years of experience in the area of domestic violence. And we're going to be talking about her new business as a business coach and a consultant. So we're going to be speaking all things with regards to mental health. And just waiting to see if we see Bianca now. Let's see if this goes. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Can you see and hear me?
I can see you. I can hear you. We're good. It looks like you're in your car.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi was acting up, so I was like, let me pop in a place so I don't have to cut out.
I appreciate it. I've been talking to a couple of people who've been having Wi-Fi issues lately, so something must be going on.
Yeah, so I was like, let me get in a place so I can go ahead and get this interview and get on with you guys.
Appreciate it. So as I was mentioning, you're a social worker by trade. You've had so much experience really just supporting youth and victims of domestic violence, and really just speaking out in regards to the importance when it comes to, and the correlation when it comes to mental health, especially when it comes to survivors and pushing forward, and also just being an advocate for social workers themselves. Because one of the things that we realize is that sometimes we put so much work into everything that we do and we forget to take time for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the floor a little bit just to introduce yourself, and for those who don't know who you are, and give you some time just to introduce yourself and what it is that you do specifically.
Yes. Well, hello, guys. Thank you for having me here, Rachel. I was so honored when you went ahead and reached out to me regarding it, and I was just very thrilled. So what I do here, so I'm in Ohio. I see some of my ladies are on from all over. So some of my social work bosses are on. So hello to you ladies who are here. For those of you guys who do not know me, my name is Bianca Edwards-Thomas, and I am a licensed social worker in Ohio. I have been doing licensed social work for the past 10 years. I started when I was 18, so I've been kind of pushing ever since. And then on that journey, I kind of led for me to kind of become my own boss. So in October, actually, I left my full-time social work job to become a full-time entrepreneur, where I help social workers kind of become coaches, become entrepreneurs, help them to leave their own 9-to-5 job, help them to practice self-care. And throughout that journey, I found that even though not being in a traditional social work role, like my role as a social worker still extends to like community research, right? Still extends to like helping people who are in the mental health field get referrals. I help even my friends, kind of balance between that their mental health in their daily lives. So I found that even though not in a traditional social work role, I'm always going to be a social worker at heart. So the credentials are always going to be there, the passion's going to be there, and people who actually, especially with mental health, is always going to be an ongoing evolving concern. So why not always be a mental health advocate even outside of my traditional role? Like that's what I signed up for when I did my code of ethics. So I've been an entrepreneur for 4 years. So I turned 4 February 7th. So my baby's a whole toddler, and with that, I have gone through some things, some ups, some downs, some challenges. I've gone through some tears, but this is my first year where I've actually seen like everything that God has given me, like kind of come into fruition. So that's just a little bit about me.
I'm sure we'll get into more as we speak throughout the night. So first off, like I know, so you were focusing for 10 years at least. You were specifically doing social work. What demographic were you primarily focused on?
When I first started, it was youth and adolescents. So I love girls between the age of 12 and 21. For me, like I always been the kind of person to kind of, especially so for young girls, kind of help them with their challenges, through puberty, through dating relationships, through kind of, their own young goals as their young women as well. So for me, it's always been adolescent girls. I worked in an inpatient facility for about 3 years, and I went from a night staff all the way to a manager, because that's how passionate I was. Even before I was even a social worker, that was my primary demographic. And through that, I learned that Black girls, especially Black girls, once you give them a voice in something, like they're dangerous, they're bad. And for me, when I was like, listen, if I can give you a voice that can lead you to the next generation, why not do that? And for me, when I was, I'm just doing this at 18, 19, they're like 12. That became my out population till I started working with domestic violence victims, which were mothers and their families. And in that, I found that those girls who weren't in a situation where they were honed in on when they were younger became those DV survivors when they were older. So they repeated cycles of domestic violence as they kind of got older, that they seen it in their own household. So for me, it was like I was stopping a cycle at a young age, well, also as in a bigger sense when I went to domestic violence.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, like the correlation between the two.
Yeah.
Because sometimes a lot of people don't look at that or don't see the interconnections between the two. So in your experience, and I know you basically just said that, where there's that correlation where some of these individuals end up unfortunately being these domestic violence survivors. What was some of the strategies that you used to kind of curb that cycle?
It was definitely like, I know we everyone knows about trauma-informed care, so kind of being able to kind of listen to where they're at, being able to kind of hone to what that trauma looks like at a young age. A lot of my, girls were like, at age of 4 were like sexually abused. A lot of them were verbally abused. So kind of being able to kind of sit there and kind of be able to listen, like, I know you're vulnerable in a sense, but you can talk to me about that. Building that rapport first was the first step I got to kind of giving them that voice, because so long they would hide those things because mom wouldn't believe them, auntie wouldn't believe them, their dads were the ones who did it to them, or their uncles. So it was like, they can get listen and ear first, the trust from there, like they'll listen to you from there. So for me, it was like, how do I meet you where you're at? Because so oftentimes you've been brushed against, like you're in an inpatient facility where your parents say, hey, go here for 3 years and get your act together, where you don't know that she was sexually abused. This is why she's acting out. So once I gave them that trust, and then it was honing on where they wanted to be in life. So kind of helping them with being able to be visionaries. So say, okay, this happened to you, but is this going to define who you're going to be in the long run? What do you want to see yourself in the next 5 years? What do you want to see yourself for school? So for me, it was all about, are we graduating? Like, what is our life skills, right? So for me, I had to teach them a lot of life skills, like how to take that trauma and turn into something that was more powerful. So a lot of my girls now, like, even though they have babies young, which, I'm a teenager teenage mom. My mom had me at young. She had me at 15. So that, that's my heart, my heart passion there. Even while having children, like telling them, hey, you may have a baby, at 15, 16, but you can still graduate college. You can still, get your degree. So a lot of them, went to nursing school. A lot of them went on to get their own college degrees. So like I see my babies now, they're like 22 and they're like, look, Miss Bianca, look what I did. So rapport building and life skills was my two main things I did.
And it's so important to be that trusting person, that person for them to come to, because like you said, sometimes it's their family members are the ones that aren't believing in what they're saying. And that's something that, especially in the Black community, is very prevalent.
Yes.
Where a lot of this abuse at times is individuals that are close, people that they've trusted themselves, who've now betrayed that trust, and the person that they're supposed to be able to come to and bring whatever fears and anxieties and whatever it is that's troubling them to is brushing them away, so to speak. And so from that time, it's who do I talk to? Who's going to listen to me? So really building that rapport, like you said, just being a listening ear. Like sometimes it's like, instead of talking, just listening.
Yeah.
Right? And so for your demographic, like you focus mainly on girls within that age group, or did you also support boys as well?
I did, but when I got into domestic violence with the families, like it was boys and girls, and it's interesting to see the response is very different. It's even culturally, like, so I had like an African family who, like, for them domestic violence wasn't something that was really spoken about in the family. So even watching like the 6-year-old boys, like, verbally abuse their mothers, it was kind of like having, like, how do you teach a child to, like, you can't tell mom that she's all kinds of, this, that, and the third, so for me, it was a little bit difficult to connect in a sense with the population for boys, but I had to be able to get to a spot where I was like, okay, how can we find common ground? Like, how can you and I sit down together and talk together and kind of get to a common ground? So it was more so of me teaching them by showing them things, like, say, here's how we communicate, here's here's the words that we use, right? So it was more like a show and tell, as opposed to them kind of sitting down and talking, because communication for my young Black boys was a little bit more harder. So I had to do more demonstration work with them.
Right. And I think it's really important to also note that, like, the communication is different depending on who you're speaking to. The same technique that might work for one may not necessarily work for another. And so you have to consistently be innovative and creative in terms of how you're able to really build that rapport. Because for some individuals, they may seem standoffish, and it may not necessarily be that way, but they just don't know how to communicate those feelings. Right.
Yeah, definitely.
I've got Natasha, who's one of the psychotherapists that work with Keepsake. She's saying cultural awareness, understanding is key, and that's so true, because depending on the cultural background, the ethnicity, various cultures, like you said, respond differently.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Now, for the youth that you were supporting, we've spoken a bit about some of the challenges they face, but I want to delve a little bit deeper in terms of specifically in racialized communities, when we're looking specifically within the Black community. How did their challenges differ from, let's say, somebody that's non-marginalized?
So you were saying in a term, well, there's different factors to that. So are you saying in terms of like their mental health wise, or are you saying like, how they respond to mental health?
We could look at it from both angles, to be honest.
Okay. I think so. Being that I was in, and it was something that was kind of interesting when working, particularly in a DV shelter, because domestic violence doesn't have a color. It could be anyone that in that sense. And we had a serious racial tension in that shelter because of how of services that were provided. So even being a Black social worker there, it was a different kind of population for us. So it will be like, oh, a lot of times we were talking about, substance abuse as a part of domestic violence. So we would get women who were African American who would say that, if I'm on drugs, like I can go ahead and get housing. But if I'm just, if I'm working a 9 to 5 job and, not, kind of providing for my family, my housing takes a little bit less. So for us, it was challenging, like, those housing barriers. And, if you were looking at our statistics, those who were Caucasian got housed a little bit quicker because there were more resources for their substance abuse. And for our mothers, kind of responding towards those housing needs, as one of the few Black social workers there, it was kind of hard to admit. And I even had to question my own stuff, like, was I contributing to that stereotype? Like, was I housing, a certain population faster than, and you don't want to look at that like that way initially, but, as a Black woman who's in a health profession, I had to look at that. I was like, is it true that, that when it comes to housing, like, there's nothing for you? Like, so what can I do to break those barriers? So I would have to sit on our county board to say, hey, like, you don't have enough resources or money for our Black families who have 5 children, right? Who have 6 children, right? But you have some who are people who don't have the children at all, but have to go into different kinds of treatment centers. So what are you going to do to house a family of 6? Can we negotiate with landlords? And oftentimes landlords want to house them because it's like, oh, I don't want no problems. So I had to do a lot of advocating where there wasn't any, and kind of letting them know that, and kind of do a lot of mental health regarding that. Like, kind of let them know, like, you're in a shelter for a year where people get out in 2 months. So their mental health declines in it. Their hope in our system, their hope in our agency failed. Their hope in me sometimes failed. They was like, I got a lot of conversations, like, on my off hours, like, what are you going to do to solve this? And it was like, I got to think of something, right? So oftentimes I will go home, and as a social worker, one of the things that we try not to do is go home with our work. But it's inevitable. We go home with it, we sit with it, we talk to our coworkers about it, we cry about it, we're in class talking about it. So being able to kind of having the challenges regarding housing and the fairness for Black mothers, for Black families, was something that's especially hard when the community I was in the Montgomery County area, and it was little to no housing resources for families who had like 5 or 6 children.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was pretty deep.
It's deep, but it's deep because it's all too common.
Mm-hmm.
It happens so regularly, and it's something that I hear from a lot of individuals that I speak with. One of some of the challenges that they face, and when you're helping someone who's really trying to push forward, and maybe like you said, they have 5, 6 children, maybe it's a single mother who's also a domestic violence survivor and has 5, 6 children and is trying to either find work or go back to school, and now there's no child care.
Yeah, especially child care.
So many components, and it has an effect on so many areas. Not just like when we think, sometimes when someone thinks domestic violence, they only think physical trauma. And no one takes in all the other components associated with that. They keep after they physically taken out of an abusive situation, there's still a lot of healing that has to be done.
Yeah. Especially with that, because financial abuse is actually the most common one. It's actually the most conforming kind of domestic violence. So financial abuse is actually the strongest one.
And I was just going to ask you about that. So there's so many different kinds of abuses. There's physical, sexual, economic, psychological, financial mentioned. So let's touch on a couple of them. So when you say financial abuse, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. So oftentimes, it's oftentimes something that you have to really kind of teach the woman about, because often she wouldn't really know what is at unless you kind of walk through the process. So think about, in a sense, that, one of the things that abusers do that's really well is they kind of groom their mate, right? They kind of get them to something like, you don't need anybody else but me, right? So they give them into this trap, and where they're like, go ahead, let's come live together, like move you from your family, I can take care of you. You don't have to work, right? That's the big sign, like, you don't have to work. And oftentimes they become trusting in a sense, because, you know, whatever they've gone through in their lives. And then from there it becomes, okay, how can I keep her? How can I keep him? In the situation, you know, let's have children together, right? So at that time, you know, you're having children and you have children to take care of, but you don't have a job. And, you know, at that time, he has you, or the person has you what they want, right? And from there, it becomes a control situation. Like, well, you don't leave until, because you don't have any money, or you can't leave because you don't have money to get back home, or you can't eat, well, you eat when I, you know, pay money for groceries. And it becomes it's a kind of emotional one for me because this is something that I grew up in and kind of seeing it play out. So kind of being where it kind of, it's like a subtle kind of abuse that kind of creeps in to the point that when the woman decides to leave, or when the person decides to leave, they're like, how do I leave? Because I have no way of starting my life over, right? It takes money to get a new apartment. It takes money to go ahead and, you know, have food for my children. It takes money to get us from point A to point B. And oftentimes children, which is, you know, the highest part of poverty for them, have to go through that because, they're dependent on school meals. They're dependent on, how they're going to get their needs met. They can't get it met if their parent is in a situation where they're not for themselves. So you're not only thinking about financial stress for the parent, but you're also thinking for the children as well, because they can't have all their needs met because it's dictated upon the abuse that's in the family. So that's just one situation right there.
And it's something that it's a creeper. It doesn't happen right away.
It's over time.
It happens over time. And those are some of the worst, because by the time one realizes it, it's already been pretty far.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank everyone who's in thus far. We are live with Bianca Thomas, celebrating Black social workers and social workers in general, especially because this month is Social Worker Month. So
yes.
Thank you for joining us. If anyone has any questions or anything, please feel free to ask and put them in the chat so that I can direct them to Bianca. Now, you'd spoken about trauma-informed. For those who don't know, what does the term trauma-informed refer to?
So there's many definitions of it, but I pretty much, when I think about trauma-informed, I think about kind of taking the trauma from the back end and bringing it forefront, right? So being able to respond in a way to someone's triggers, be able to respond in a way to someone's past situations in a way that doesn't victim blame them, but actually shows empathy. So when you think of trauma-informed, you're talking with a person like, hey, this person has gone through a traumatic experience. What can I say to them, or how can I respond to them that won't re-trigger a response from them? And that's pretty much, in a sense, what trauma-informed looks like. Sometimes, when you're thinking about, especially children who've gone through like different kind of trauma, like, how do you say, oh, you're just a bad child, or it's your parents' fault, right? Those are triggering phrases where it's like, okay, what's going on in the home? How can I help you? Like, is there anything that's making you upset? So it's pretty much a response to a traumatic experience that takes into consideration the empathy part, takes into consideration the triggers of a person, takes into consideration on what can be re-traumatizing for them.
And I know now, with so much focus on the Black community, there's been there's been a full call of action when it comes to trauma-informed therapy. And even just really speaking from a corporation's perspective and speaking from an anti-Black lens, understanding what that looks like. And so, especially for individuals who've been through various types of trauma, like we've mentioned, we've talked about physical trauma, we've talked about financial trauma, having that ability to really communicate in a way that builds that level of trust and takes into consideration so many different factors is highly important in really being successful in the work that you do.
Yeah. It's an experience because oftentimes some agencies take it slower than others, and especially if you're in an agency where not everyone has that believes in trauma-informed care, when they're like, oh, this is really their fault, it makes it difficult for our agency to be effective, because I've worked in agencies where our mission was trauma-informed care, but our staff wasn't trauma-informed care at all. So
And that's something I want to touch on because it's very easy to make a mission statement or a vision or to say something on paper. We see it all the time with so many, even just individuals who might say a comment and then come out with that statement to cover it up, right? But it's what is the action behind it? And so when you're mentioning this, like our agencies trauma informed care, but our people are not. How do you, and seeing now, and we're going to kind of delve into your business and entrepreneurship itself, but how does one ensure that their people follow through with what their message or their vision is?
Oh, there's a lot to say about that one. So initially when the term trauma informed care kind of came out, it was a hot topic because, you know, when you think about the study of average child experiences, where I think her name was Dr. Burke. She was a really well-known doctor who kind of brought to light, you know, hey, like children go through traumatic experiences, which leads to poverty, which leads to mortality, you know, stuff like that. So connected their trauma to their health. It was a big thing. It was like, wow, like, you know, we need money for this, right? We need to kind of get agencies on board. We need to send out dollars. So initially it was a way to kind of, for agencies to get money for their programs, you know, grant funding. And I don't think they took the time to really look at that and what it meant to have a trauma-informed care agency, the training that was required, the practices that were required, the reevaluation was required, you know, making sure your staff, you know, had monthly follow-ups about getting able to, so I was looking at one of my people, she's like, yep, trauma for it, and getting them informed about how that trauma not only affects the people that are, you know, that's, you know, the people that you're working with, but also like when you come.
I don't know if it's me that froze or if you.
I'm sorry, can you see?
We froze a little bit, so I'm just waiting to see.
Can you hear me and
Not
see me?
yet. Oh, you're back. I can hear you.
Okay.
I'm just waiting. Yeah,
Let me know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. It's just, yeah,
Okay,
we're good.
sorry, kind of
Perfect.
cut out a little bit.
No
All right.
problem.
Sorry. So yeah, so when you're thinking about situations like that, you know, the first part was like, how do you get your staff trained? How do you reevaluate what they need as far as, you know, their follow-up? So I think in a sense of that, with, you know, first having a person that's designated in an agency that's going to be able to talk about, you know, to hold people accountable for trauma-informed care, right? So having one designated person that can then teach agencies, or having that one designated like consultant or one designated representative within the HR team that can hold you accountable, because it's not something that you can say, oh, we can have one training, one and done. It's a ongoing process, because you're thinking about the people, you yourself, when you come to work trigger, you know, you think about your triggers coming to work, impacting the individuals. And that right there causes a situation where if you fail to follow through with the mission completely, you're gonna end up, your agency's gonna end up re-traumatizing everyone that comes through the doors. So
And it's doing more harm than good.
yeah, definitely.
And I think that's why it's so important to get into the habit now of unlearning to relearn. Because a lot of times it's very easy for someone to say, well, we've always done things this way. But if we unlearn to relearn, then we're able to understand how we can really support. And just looking at it. So we've got a comment here that's saying, this is the issue that I'm dedicated to fix. It's time to hold agencies accountable to make sure the staff is trauma-informed trained.
Yes.
For sure. Trauma is linked to many issues that impact our internal and external structure. Yeah, 100%. Definitely agree with that. Again, if anyone has anything that they want to add or questions or anything, please feel free. Tanisha, look at my cousin. So proud of you, lady. Hi. So you got into social work. You got into working with domestic violence survivors. Um, and then you've now gotten into consulting and being a business entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Like, what's the story behind that? Because I know you mentioned it a little earlier, where you said in October you quit your full-time job and started your own business.
Mhm.
So let's backtrack. What's the story behind that?
So that's like been like a calling that's been like peeking at me that I made the jump for. So back when, and this is kind of something that came throughout my social work journey. So everything kind of impacts one things over the next. When I was in doing my social work journey, like I have this passion to always kind of help people get out of poverty, right? So my personal mission regarding whatever I do social work is to end the system of generational poverty, right? Because I grew up in a home, I grew up in a family where generational poverty was, a thing. So like for me, it was like, how can I put my family on, right? Like I don't want to see my family broke. I don't want to see them, in a system where we out here struggling. So I think at the age of 12, like my mom planted this seed really early inside of me, and she was like, whatever you do, like live life to the fullest, like have a business, right? That's all she knew, have a business, right? My dad, he's a very entrepreneur stricken person. He's like, listen, like if we can make money out of it, let's do it. So I come from parents that have that entrepreneur mindset. So it was like kind of being their firstborn, it was kind of innate in me. But it really peaked as I was doing my social work journey, and it kind of happened for me like it was planted at 12, but it was like it grew at 28, right? I was going throughout my social work journey, and at now I didn't know it then, but now I knew that throughout that journey, like I suffered a lot of collegiate racism. I suffered a lot of being, because I went to a PWI. So for me, being the only brown girl at my university, my teachers didn't always respond in a way that was, I'm not going to give them excuses. They pretty much, because I was African American female and because how I challenged the systems there, I wasn't really liked, right? I was pulled into a meeting with my board of directors, and they were saying like, I don't think you should be a social worker. I don't think you're going to get your license. Like, I don't think you're going to be good at this job, right? And I'm there at 19, like, crying as like, you should drop the program and you should change your major, right? And I had already changed initially from a major to social work, because that's what really my passion was. But to hear it, to kind of, get out of this program because belong here, from someone who didn't look like me, um was really hard to kind of take in, and I did a lot. That situation, I think, affected me to the point that I remember, I was in my last year, and the professor who had failed me was like, he was there for my final year, and what he did was like right before graduation, he failed me. So I had spent 4 years in undergrad. So I'm trying not to like, get emotional now, but I spent 4 years in undergrad to not walk across the stage. And for me, it was hard to accept that. It was hard for me to accept that I had spent all this time in school and wasn't going to get a degree, to the point that I completely changed schools, because I was I didn't want to finish my degree there. I completely changed schools. And I remember I met a African American male, so shout out to all the Black men. And he literally like spoke life right back into me. He was like, listen, I don't know what you've been through, but you look broken. Like, you look like you have nothing to show for. You look like you've given up on life. You look like you have tears. He goes, whatever you lost, go back and get it. He was like, don't let no one tell you that you're not going to be what you want to. So for him, like, he didn't know. He was like the short little Black man. He's, in his 60s, grew up in the civil rights era. He was like, listen, like, whatever they took from me, go back and get it. And I remember him telling me that. And literally that same year, I graduated and got my licensure. Like, so I was like, listen, like, and then the point that, like, even the teacher now, like, it was this whole scandal at my PWI where they was the shout out teachers who were racist, and they were like, hey, like, this man right here. So I was committed at that point, my social work was my calling, but like, I wasn't gonna have no one else take anything from me. I wasn't gonna have no one take my education. I wasn't gonna have nobody take like, at that time I was 28. I was broken. So at 28, I was, everything that was stolen from me, I'm gonna go back and get it, including the business ideas that I have. And for me, being an entrepreneur, especially a social entrepreneur, like, we work so hard. We put when we do social work, this is like we come from a very emotional state, and for us to be told that we're not good at what we do, or for us to be told that we can't make the money, because the average social worker makes about $60,000 a year. and only 10% of us make 91,000, so not even six figures. So for me, it was like I can't have this awesome gift and not make the money that I'm required to make, and also not be in a position where I can help other people. So that for me, like at 28 was like, it was my queen moment. I was feeling myself. I had my degree, I had my LSW, and I was like, I'm going back and getting everything that was taken from me. So that's how it went.
And you went back and you took everything. You got everything back. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just reading like a lot of the comments here, speaking to the anti-Black racism, especially within school, because sometimes it's one of those things that it's so shaded that some people don't even recognize it for what it is.
Yeah.
And especially when someone who does not have the same complexion, does not look like you, comes to tell you that you can't do something, especially
Mm-hmm.
when you've come and you've grown up and you've always been told that you've been told so many different things about what you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And here you are now doing them, and to be told, no, like, this isn't you. You need to give up. You need to do something else. That in itself is a whole other level of trauma.
Yeah.
Right? And people don't realize that.
Yeah.
They don't realize it at all. Vicky says, wow, the caucasity. Whatever they took, go back and get it. 100%. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you got your license, you started practicing, and this is, as you said, it's been something like entrepreneurship has been something that's just been building up, and then you quit your job.
Mm-hmm.
How did that go?
That so it was like one of those situations. It was like I was kind of feeling it before. I was like, I was stressed out on my job. I was putting in a lot of work, and mind you, I was working with the homeless population. So for me, it was already kind of a trigger because I've been homeless before in my family. So for me, it was like I'm hearing these stories of homelessness, and I really want to like just help them on a larger scale. Like I can't be confined to where I'm at. And at that point, job wasn't treating us the way we should have been treated. Especially as social workers who I went into mental health, and I was like, I'm not really happy here. This is not something that I can do for the rest of my life. So it was kind of like I was getting those feelings initially. And then it's so funny that I was like, I was on watching Facebook and kind of, in different kind of Facebook groups. And one of the ladies that I was listening to, she was talking about how she, went into her entrepreneur journey. So I just so happened to, she makes six figures as a business coach. So I just kind of, jumped on a call with her, and I asked her a question. I was like, how do you know when it's time to leave your job? Like, what if you're so unhappy, like if you just, you don't have a backup plan, right? How do you know when it's time? She goes, when you get that initial feeling, just jump for it. And I was like, that doesn't tell me anything. So for me, it was kind of like, I thought about it, and then, I kind of sat there and looking at my own business, where I was at my business, and I was like, everything was working, and did the numbers, and I realized that I could make in a day what I get in 2 weeks. And I was like, huh. So that was another factor. But then what happened was I went to work. I woke up one morning, and it was like, how you have that feeling of like, I just can't do it anymore. Like, I'm just so unhappy. Like, if I go there one more time, like someone's going to curse out, something's gonna burn down, And for me as a social worker, I can't risk my license over my performance. So like my performance at my job was declining significantly. And for me, I was to the point like I woke up one morning like in full tears. And I was like, I just can't do it, baby, anymore. And my husband was like, listen, like, what do you want? Like, why are you so scared to leave? Like, why can't you just set your date and leave? And I was like, because I feel like if I leave, like everything's gonna fall apart. He goes, has it fell apart? Yeah, like what? Like, why are you scared? Like, you have a strong support system. If anything was to happen on that journey, you have family, right? He goes, you work with clients, like you the income matches with where you're at. So are you gonna continue to live a life where you're going to be unhappy, or are you gonna actually fulfill that dream and kind of, if things happen on the way, at least you're doing what you want. So shout out to my husband, who has been the greatest support throughout this journey, because what I noticed that as I was pushing back for my job, like he was kind of increasing in his, like he was getting promotions, he was getting raises, and I was like, why is all these good things are happening from at that point? I didn't know it was like it was destiny. Like as he was elevated, it was giving me that safety net to kind of leave. Assurance came. I was on it together, and I was like, you know what do I have to lose, right? I could either risk another 5 years at an agency that doesn't fulfill my passion to kind of help other people, or what I could do is actually help social workers like myself, and especially income as I get looking at how much my social workers had to get side gigs. Like, why are we with master's degrees having working a full-time job and working in restaurants? Why are we doing all this work, 8 hours, getting cussed out and then coming home and having to, worry about, who's going to pay our bills. So it was really a call to action for social workers, to kind of put us in a position to change the narrative. Like, there's this thing that, social workers, when you go into, but you don't go in it for money, just go because you love. We got things to take care of too. So it was to help social workers change the narrative that we can still address mental health, we can still advocate, but we can also advocate for ourselves, right? My business partner, shout out to Lisette, tells me that we are always exhibit A, and that we should look at ourselves first, because if we the healers can't heal other people because we're too boggled down, how are we going to do our jobs for the community? So it was more of like, who's going to be that savior for those who's supposed to help other people. So that's where I put myself in that position.
Right. And it's been a couple months now because it was October.
Mm-hmm.
And been you've had so much, like I know, even just looking at your posts and seeing how everything just falls into line,
Yeah.
right? And it's really about trusting your intuition and taking that risk, that leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so what advice do you have for individuals who are thinking of starting a new career, a new journey based on your own experience?
Mm-hmm. I would say the first thing you want to do is always plan. If you don't have a plan, like it doesn't even matter if you have because people used to say, have 6 months saved up. That wasn't my plan, right? It was like, I gotta get out of here now. So I would say, as long as you have a written down plan, because if you don't at least write your vision down, you're not going to know what your roadmap is. So you need a roadmap, right? Tell yourself, like, in the next 5 years, this is where I need to be. Because what happens when you actually have those words written down and you're speaking those words constantly, you're actually shaping that destiny for yourself, right? You're actually speaking like life to your journey. So like for me, I am a constant believer of affirmations. So when I wake up every morning, I was like, I'm gonna book 4 clients. I'm gonna make, $84,000 this month, or I'm gonna sell, $400 in sales this month. And what happens is, because I wake up with that mindset, our mind is a powerful tool. If I wake up with that mindset, like, my body has to align to everything that I say. Even if I'm going through, like, have like a bad day, at least I can say I went to bed knowing that I tried, or I went to bed knowing that I reached my goal. And I think what oftentimes people sometimes jump, and don't really kind of test things out first to see how it goes. But you kind of have to evaluate your situation. Like, if you have a strong support system and people who's ready to ride for you, go ahead and make that jump. Like, my mom wouldn't let me fail. Like, my husband wouldn't let me fail. So I made that jump, and I knew that, I had to support them, right? When before launching my business, I had beta testers. Like, I had people who I can try my program on. I can see, does this work? Do you think it's a good program? So once having that plan, I was able to test it out on people. And then once it worked, all you do is duplicate that thing, right? If you have a program that works the first time, do it better the second time, and keep doing it over and over again till you actually reach the money that you want, right? Making $84,000 a month is like easy work now to me, right? It's because I'm able to kind of, shift that into something else. So definitely have the first thing is have that written plan first. Evaluate your support team. Make sure you have people on your team who can motivate you, who can hold you accountable, have an accountability partner. And once you have that support team plus a plan, it doesn't matter if you have money in the bank saved up, you're going to reach your goal.
Amazing. um so you're so busy now. You've got clients, you're consulting. Um, and a question that I have for you is, how do you take time for self love and self healing and self care?
Mm.
I know you mentioned it, and even Vicky, I think Vicky just mentioned it again as well. Healers need to take the time to heal themselves. and to be
Mm.
healed by others. That's actually a very, very good point, Vicky, is that we take the time to heal ourselves and to be healed by others. Because we can't do it alone. Um, so how do you take care of yourself? How do you take time for yourself?
I make it very intentional. What I do is I become very self-aware, and for me, I make it a priority. So and it's one of my core values. So self-care is actually a core value for me. If I don't practice it, I know that I'm not fulfilling that core value. So for me, like when I notice myself becoming very anxious, or like that those racing heartbeats, or I'm feeling like overstressed about something, I like, listen, this is a trigger. Where is it coming from? How can you overcome that? So for me, I actually, once I'm clicking in self-awareness mode, I immediately take a break. I know that once I have that, even if I'm going through like a busy schedule, or if, I'm on a call, I'm like, listen, like I need time for me, and I will literally schedule a day just for myself. Oftentimes it's either early in the morning when I first wake up, or right before I go to bed. But it's time where I'm like away from everybody. So I'm away from my husband, I'm away from my family. Cell phones off, no social media, and I'm literally like in my closet, like, okay, breathe, like breathe again, take a deep breath. So for me, I make it to at least once a day, whether it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm actually taking care of myself, because I know that I can't be at my best if I'm not taking care of myself. Like I can't, and I actually have a accountability partner that lets me know, like, listen, like, did you take self-care today? Did you breathe today? Did you focus on you today? So I actually have a person in my corner that says, listen, you need to shut your laptop down. You need to get away from that computer and just take some and sleep. I actually had that Monday where I was like, I had woke up, like I was up to 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was missing missing appointment dates and stuff. She was like, go to bed. Just go to bed. So having an accountability person and having that self-awareness definitely does help making sure that you're practicing self-care every day.
Yeah, I think it's very important to have an accountability partner. And I'm one who always speaks on building your village.
Mm,
That's something that I speak on regularly. And it's really important to have people in your corner that are able to support you and make sure that you're taking care of you.
mm-hmm,
And we have to recognize and acknowledge them for that as well, too, because it's so easy for us to just forget about ourselves and get so wrapped up in work and everything that we're doing, that
mm-hmm,
and become so overwhelmed, and realize that in our journey of trying to help so many people, we're really running our own selves down.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes it
Yeah.
takes having that outside person to say, did you sleep?
Mm-hmm,
Or like you said, did you sleep? Or someone who, did you take time for self? Or did you do your morning affirmations? Or someone that you can really even just speak to about those things.
mm-hmm.
So I'm forever grateful for my tribe and my village.
Yeah.
In that, and I know I have one of my tribe sisters in here right now, but um, it's very important to build that village.
Mm-hmm. Very.
So I want to thank you, Bianca, for sharing the space with me. Definitely so inspiring, and just seeing the passion that you have for the work that you do. I
Thank you.
want to take some time to just let everyone know where they can find you. How can they reach you?
Yes, definitely. So I have my website is royat28.com. That's where you can reach me for all kinds of information, whether you want to talk to me in person. I do offer like 20-minute calls just to kind of talk, just like, even if it's just about entrepreneurship, if it's about, how do you set your goal, I do offer those, because I do think sometimes people just kind of need a listening ear, or someone to say, hey, here's where you need to go with that. So definitely for that. For my social work, because I'm a social worker life coaches, so that's me on Instagram. For all my other entrepreneurs, I'm at Royat28, which is my other business page. So I kind of have two different audiences. But again, you can find me again for social work life coaches for all social workers, and Royat28 for all entrepreneurs. And my business, my website is royat28.com. And I'm on Google, so you can Google me too. I have an office, so you can go ahead and do that.
I'm going to be sure to post everything in the caption so everyone knows where to find you.
Yes.
This is saying accountability should be part of our care plan. Self-care doesn't work without it 100%. And Vicky
Yes.
be part. So this the reason I'm laughing about. So Vicky is my tribe sister, that she's my accountability partner, and she's in here right now. And I'll tell you, as much as it's funny, sometimes that phone call, do you need porridge? Listen.
It's everything.
Trust me. What kind of porridge do you want? Banana porridge or cornmeal porridge? Yes. So no, it's a very important question.
Oh my God, I just died.
Um, but thank you so much, Bianca, for coming on. I think you said that it might have died, so it might have just lost you. But for everyone that is watching, thank you for tuning in. I will be posting all of Bianca's information in the caption, so you can feel free to connect, reach out to her, regard business inquiries, social work inquiries, anything to that regard. I'm your co-host Rachel, and next week we will be back connecting the six, so with another special guest. And on Thursday we will be holding our Empowerment to Unlock the Justice System, which will be speaking on women supporting loved ones incarcerated. So until next week.